Everyone knows Rome fell, but what most people don't know is why. And if you understood the real reasons, the actual mechanisms that destroyed the greatest empire in human history, you'd see them playing out right now in America. Same patterns, same arrogance, same ending. In the 5th century, Romans believed their empire was eternal. They had the strongest military, the reserve currency of the known world, and technologies that seemed almost magical. Their citizens were comfortable, entertained, and completely convinced that collapse was impossible. Until the day it wasn't. If you've noticed prices rising faster than your salary, if you've wondered why America spends more on the military than the next 10 countries combined, or if you've ever felt like you're being distracted from something important, you're not paranoid. You're watching history repeat itself in real time. Before we dive deeper, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what's one thing about the economy that keeps you up at night? I read every comment, and your perspective matters. And if you want to understand where this is all heading, hit subscribe. Because this story will change how you see every news headline from this point forward. Rome didn't fall because of barbarians. That was the final symptom, not the cause. The empire hollowed itself out from within through 3 specific mechanisms. And America is following the same playbook. First, currency debasement. Rome systematically destroyed the value of its money, turning gold and silver coins into worthless metal. Sound familiar? Second, military overextension. Rome stretched its legions across 3 continents, bleeding resources to maintain an empire it could no longer afford. Check America's military budget lately. Third, bread and circuses. Rome kept its citizens docile with free grain and endless entertainment while the system crumbled around them. Today, it's stimulus checks and social media. These aren't vague similarities, they're precise parallels. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. Let's start with money, because this is where every collapse begins. In 64 AD, under Emperor Nero, the Roman denarius was nearly pure silver. It was trusted across the empire and beyond. Merchants from Britain to Egypt accepted it without question. That coin was a promise, a store of value, a foundation of trust. But Rome had a problem. Endless wars, massive infrastructure projects, a growing welfare state, and not enough revenue to pay for it all. So they did what governments always do when they run out of money. They cheated. They started shaving silver from the coins, mixing in copper and bronze. At first, just a little. Then more. Then more. By the year 200 AD, the denarius was less than 50% silver. By 265 AD, it was barely 5%. The coin looked the same. The stamp of the emperor was still there. But the value was gone. And what happened? Prices exploded. What used to cost 1 denarius now cost 10, then 100, then 1,000. Merchants stopped accepting them. Soldiers refused to be paid in worthless metal. Trade collapsed. The economy seized up. This wasn't just inflation. This was the destruction of trust itself. Now, let's talk about America. In 1971, President Nixon did something that doesn't get talked about enough. He closed the gold window, ending the promise that dollars could be exchanged for gold. Since then, the dollar has been backed by nothing but trust. And how has America used that freedom? Since 1971, the dollar has lost over 85% of its purchasing power. The money supply has exploded. In 2020 alone, the US printed 40% of all dollars ever created, 40% in 1 year. The denarius took 2 centuries to collapse. The dollar is sprinting toward the same end in decades. Your grandparents could buy a house on a single income. A car cost a few thousand. College was affordable. Rome debased its currency slowly. America is doing it with a printing press on overdrive. The mechanisms are different. The result is the same. Rome, at its peak, controlled the Mediterranean, Western Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Legions were stationed from Scotland to Syria. Everywhere Rome conquered, it had to garrison. And garrisons cost money, lots of it. By the 3rd century, military spending consumed more than half of Rome's budget. Soldiers demanded higher pay, fortifications needed constant repair, and every new threat, from Persia to Germanic tribes, required more troops. The empire was trapped. Pull back and lose territory. Stay committed and bleed resources. So Rome did what desperate empires do. It raised taxes, squeezed provinces, confiscated wealth. And still, it wasn't enough. The borders became indefensible, not because Rome lacked brave soldiers, but because it lacked the wealth to sustain them. Now, look at America's defense budget. In 2024, it's over $850 billion. That's more than China, Russia, India, the UK, Saudi Arabia, Germany, France, Japan, and South Korea combined. America has about 750 military bases in 80 countries. Troops in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Africa, Europe, Asia, everywhere. And the cost, it's not just the budget. It's the opportunity cost. That $850 billion could rebuild infrastructure, fund education, reduce debt. Instead, it maintains an empire that, like Rome, is increasingly difficult to defend and impossible to afford. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union collapsed under military spending it couldn't sustain. America watched it happen, learned nothing, and repeated the mistake. Rome's legions were the finest fighting force in history. But even the best soldiers can't prop up an economic system that's bankrupt. America's military is unmatched. But when the economy that funds it collapses, the bases close, the ships are mothballed, and the empire contracts. History doesn't care about exceptionalism. In 140 AD, the Roman poet Juvenal wrote about a population that had given up political power in exchange for two things: free grain and entertainment. Bread and circuses, he called it, and it worked. As long as Romans had food and games, they didn't ask questions. They didn't protest, they didn't demand accountability. The government provided free or subsidized grain to hundreds of thousands of citizens. The Colosseum hosted spectacles, gladiators, executions, mock naval battles. And Rome's elite loved it, because a distracted population is a controllable population. Fast forward to today, America doesn't have gladiators. It has Netflix, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. The average American spends over 7 hours a day on screens, not working, not creating, just consuming, scrolling, numbing. And when economic anxiety spikes, what does the government do? Stimulus checks. In 2020 and 2021, trillions of dollars were handed out, not to fix the economy, but to keep people quiet, to delay the reckoning. It's the same playbook, bread and circuses. Direct deposits and dopamine hits. Think about it. When was the last time you saw mass protests about monetary policy? About the Federal Reserve printing money? About debt exceeding $34 trillion? You don't, because people are too busy watching the circus. The circus of political theater, celebrity scandals, viral trends. The algorithm feeds you outrage, not understanding. Reaction, not reflection. Rome's citizens were given just enough comfort to surrender their power. America's citizens are given just enough distraction to ignore theirs. Here's the part that should terrify you. Rome's collapse wasn't sudden. It was gradual, a slow decay that took generations. And at every stage, Romans believed they were different, that they were exceptional, that the old rules didn't apply to them. They believed their currency would always be trusted, until merchants refused it. They believed their military would always protect them, until the borders collapsed. They believed their people would stay loyal, until they stopped caring. And by the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. The mechanisms of collapse were already irreversible. America is in the same denial. We're told the dollar is strong, that military spending ensures security, that technology and innovation make us immune to history, but none of that addresses the fundamentals. The US dollar is the global reserve currency. But for how long? Countries are already trading in yuan, rubles, and even cryptocurrencies to avoid dollar dependence. The privilege of printing the world's money only lasts as long as the world trusts you. And trust, once lost, doesn't come back. Military power doesn't prevent collapse. Rome had the greatest military in history. The Soviet Union had nuclear weapons. Britain ruled a quarter of the globe. All of them fell when the economics underneath crumbled. And distraction doesn't create stability. It creates ignorance. A population entertained into submission doesn't suddenly wake up and fix the system. They wake up when it's already gone. The timelines are compressing. What took Rome centuries is happening to America in decades. Information moves faster. Money moves faster. Collapse, when it comes, will move faster too. So what happens next? If the pattern holds, if history is any guide, the answer is clear. Empires that debase their currency, overextend their military, and pacify their populations with bread and circuses don't reform. They collapse. But here's the uncomfortable truth. You can't stop it. The mechanisms are already in motion. Debt is too high. The money supply is too inflated. The military commitments are too vast. The distractions are too powerful. What you can do is protect yourself. Because when systems fail, individuals who saw it coming survive. History rewards the prepared and punishes the faithful. Rome's citizens, who held real assets, land, gold, goods, survived the collapse. Those who trusted the denarius were wiped out. Americans, who understand that dollars are losing value, that the system is unsustainable, can position themselves accordingly. Tangible assets, skills that create value, communities that function outside fragile supply chains. The lesson isn't to panic, it's to pay attention. To stop believing in permanence and start preparing for change. Rome fell because Romans stopped believing it could. And by the time they took it seriously, the collapse was inevitable. America is following the same path. Currency debasement, military overextension, bread, and circuses. The script hasn't changed, only the names and dates. So ask yourself, are we different this time? Or are we just Romans in better suits, repeating history because we refuse to learn from it? If this changed how you see the world, subscribe. Because the parallels go deeper than you think, and the next chapter is already being written.